Hello, we're back from our big exam we had last week. So I think most of you were able to complete that. If your grade isn't quite what you wanted it to be, um, I'm not sure what to recommend. If you got a high enough grade, say you got a C, you should go in and do the extra credit that's being offered in the extra credit module. So you have 2 extra credit opportunities that you can complete. And you can complete them at any time, but the sooner the better, right? Because things continue to build up. You'll continue to have lots of demands from your other classes in addition to this class. So I would definitely go and complete that extra credit you can pick one, you can complete 2 extra credits this semester, and each one will count toward 10 points toward your midterm and the other one toward your final exam. I think if you had a C, you can easily bring your grade up to a B. If you had a B, you can probably bring up your grade to an A. So it's very worthwhile to go in there. You want to keep those GPAs up. Remember that you cannot risk getting a C because a C is considered a failing grade in graduate school. And I want you to succeed in the class. The other thing is to learn how to manage your time. So you knew this exam was coming up. You knew you had an entire week to complete the exam. You knew that you had 2.5 hours to complete the exam. You knew that it was open book, open notebook, open everything, right? So you just had to organize your notes and make sure you were responding to, preparing and responding to those review questions that I provided for your exam. Those covered almost everything that was on the exam. So if you didn't bother to try to put those things together and thought you could look up all the answers for the exam, that was a very bad strategy to follow. If your grade was particularly low and you want to come and talk to me about, whether you should drop the class or whether different opportunities to bring up your grade or how to prepare better for the next exam, we can talk. I will not give anyone an opportunity to retake the exam. It's like many people managed to do very well on the exam, so I know that it wasn't an impossible exam. I had several A's in the class and several B's, and then I had a few failing grades as well. So definitely shoot me an email and we'll try to set up a time for us to meet and talk and to decide what's the best strategy, whether to postpone taking this class for next year. Perhaps that's an option for you because I know times might be particularly difficult and challenging for some people. That does not mean that I will dumb down the class just so that everybody can get an A or a B. If this isn't the appropriate time for you to complete this class, then maybe that's something we need to talk about and evaluate, okay? But to the extent possible, I will try to offer suggestions on how to improve on future assignments and especially on the final exam. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the upcoming assignment that is due next week or on Sunday, I believe. You have your PSAs that are due. And again, these are group assignments. And if you have not contacted your group, if you had not been responsive to emails from your teammates in your group, then you are likely going to get a 0 on the assignment. Just because your group turned in an assignment does not mean you will get credit. And I'm trying to establish a way for you to submit at least, where the people carried their fair share of the project and helped out with it versus someone who just sat back and did nothing to assist with the assignment. And, you know, you do have to learn to work with other people in our field of public health. You have to learn how to do that. So you have to make an effort. And if your group has developed their assignment and completed it, and you are just now ready to join in to help out, I would say you have missed the boat in terms of contributing. You've had 3 weeks to pull this together, or at least to start discussing and developing some options for how you were going to contribute to the assignment. So it's not okay if you've just been sitting out and being non-responsive, okay? If your group has completed the assignment, you need to come and talk to me if you were not part of any contribution to that assignment, okay? So I will be checking my email and setting aside some time for us to talk, okay? All right, so let's start with this week's lecture. We are going to be focusing on social cognitive theory, and this is more of an interpersonal type of theory. It covers both individual factors, like the previous theories we have been describing, that include a lot of cognitions in the individual, right? But it also involves a lot of factors within the environment, within the social and physical environment that we might be interacting with. And so really this theory is super duper comprehensive. It throws everything in except the kitchen sink. And so there's lots to talk about. So let's get going with that, okay? So Albert Bandura is the founding researcher for the social cognitive theory. Oops. Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about the historical development of this theory, and then we'll go over each of the individual constructs of the social cognitive theory and examine what level they fall in within the cognitive type of variables or constructs versus more environmental or interpersonal type of constructs, okay? And then we're going to talk a little bit about how the theory is applied and a very brief discussion or summary at the end regarding future directions. Okay, so let's start with the historical overview. So basically, Albert Bandura is one of the most frequently cited researchers in our time. And one of the reasons for that is that he helped identify some really important contributions as to what types of things influence behavior. And so he's credited with discovering or teaching us about observational learning. And this is also called social learning theory. And basically this just presents the idea that we learn by observing others. And what we learn from others is whether we find the person who's modeling the behavior as someone significant or important or influential in our lives. And also any emotional context around the role modeling also plays a role or a level of influence in what we learn. So basically, we can learn vicariously through observing how others engage in behaviors. And we'll talk about those components that are affiliated with factors that really enhance social learning theory or enhance vicarious learning. Another thing he discovered or he really formulated the social cognitive theory, which he based partially on social learning theory, but also incorporated self-efficacy and expectancies. And we'll talk about those different constructs in a little bit. He also is the main founder of the concept of self-efficacy. And so, again, we'll cover each of these in greater detail. So this is basically combining two levels of the ecological model: an individual, interpersonal, general environment, as opposed to all the different levels that one would see in the socio-ecological model, all the way up to policy and advocacy. Okay, so social learning theory states that individuals or humans learn behavior from those around them by imitating them. And so you may have, as a child or even as a young adult, observed certain things on TV that you picked up. And that could be anything from language to actual behaviors, right, that we pick up because we think they're either funny or they make the person look cool or smart or whatever the case, whatever we find desirable about the situation. We know that when trying to incorporate a social learning theory component to our interventions, the characteristics of the role model that is demonstrating the behavior that is being observed, those characteristics are really important. And so the role model has to be someone that the audience can identify with. So typically we want to see someone exhibiting the behavior that is somehow like us, right? So if we're an older person trying to learn physical activity and we're watching somebody teach us how to carry out certain physical activity, we don't want a young whippersnapper, right, going out there and say, just do it like this, and you're like, yeah, you're 20 years old and, I'm 70. What, this is not for me, right? It has to be someone who is like me. So maybe it's another 70-year-old. And like, okay, if that 70-year-old can do it, then I can do it too, right? So those type of characteristics are important. Many times it's important also for the role model to be someone that is admired or popular or famous even. So that's why they use a lot of celebrities. Sometimes we use celebrities in our community to try to promote a certain behavior, and they demonstrate that they engage in the behavior as well. So, and that they think the behavior is important, right? So those kind of characteristics are really important. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you about that? So yeah, so the person has to demonstrate the behavior. And the other thing is that the individual, typically if it's a video or if they're, it's typically in a video that we're observing other people's behaviors. Typically we want them somehow to be rewarded for engaging in the behavior, right? So, what could it be? So it could be any kind of positive outcome. So if I engage I'm the role model, I'm engaging in physical activity, and then I talk about how good I feel after I exercise, I feel good emotionally, I feel good physically, right? And that's kind of like the reward in itself. So it's kind of like that is a demonstration of positive outcomes or a type of reinforcement of engaging in physical activity. But it could be more of a concrete reward as well. So I can go and, because I exercise today, I am still physically active and I can interact with my grandchildren. And so you might demonstrate in the video that I'm interacting with my grandchildren, which is something I really love to do. And being physically active allows me to do that, right? Okay. And so here, I'm not going to play it because it's kind of a long video, but it demonstrates experiments done with children and a little Bobo doll, which is like a punching bag. And it demonstrates how when the teacher or someone goes in and demonstrates a behavior, an aggressive behavior with the doll, the children observing the behavior also learn to become aggressive. And so it's pretty interesting. It's pretty old, but I recommend you go see it. Okay. Okay, so again, social cognitive theory is one of the most widely applied models, and it's used for a variety of things from, trying to reduce risk behaviors to increasing healthy behaviors, and even to promote group level changes. Okay. So let's talk about all the constructs that are covered under social cognitive theory. All right, let's see. All right, so we talked about there being these individual factors, right, or individual level constructs that are part of social cognitive theory. And so, how we think about a behavior really influences whether we're going to engage in that behavior. So the constructs listed here are self-efficacy, collective efficacy, outcome expectations, and knowledge. So let's talk about each of those individual ones. And so self-efficacy is one that we've covered before, right? As several of the behavior change theories include self-efficacy as an important construct. It's key in order to, for behavior to be carried out and to even be, for an individual to be motivated to carry out the behavior. They have to have a sense of confidence to be able to carry out the behavior. So it was one of the, the formative constructs of social cognitive theory. So self-efficacy, and how is that different, right? How is that different from just having skills to perform a behavior? And so we could go back to the example with condoms, right? It's like a person might be very capable of knowing, having the behavioral skill to apply a condom. But when it comes to a social situation, an interpersonal situation where they have to introduce the condom to their partner, they might lack confidence in that regard. So whether they might have confidence to just apply a condom in private, they might not have the confidence to do so in front of a partner. Okay, so how is self-efficacy promoted in interventions? Well, we can have them engage in vicarious learning just through observation of the behavior in different situations that are relevant to performing that specific behavior. Through encouragement and, or discouragement from engaging in certain behaviors. Any previous experience on the individual, any, direct practice. So many times we engage people in role playing, not just in, observing a role model, but first we have them observe and then we have them engage in the actual behavior and role play as if they were interacting with someone important to them in their environment, right? Where they need to carry out the behavior. Emotional arousal is also important, right? So we know that when a behavior is emotional linked, we're better able to remember it. But emotional arousal has to be favorable for carrying out the behavior. Okay. So any kind of event that's emotionally charged is going to be associated with a stronger relationship, with a stronger memory for the behavior. Okay, so emotional arousal is good. Okay, behavioral capability is just the knowledge and the skill to perform any given behavior. For example, I can ride a bicycle. around here in my community without heavy traffic, right? I felt pretty confident. I know how to count calories. But that's very different, right, from self-efficacy. So we were just talking about this distinction, right? The distinction between behavioral skills or actually having the confidence to carry out those behavioral skills. And so, can I do it? Can I do it when I have to perform it in front of other people? Right? That's a big thing. Or when I'm in my real environment, not in this controlled environment where I'm learning how to carry out the behavior, but when I'm back home, right? When people are around me, maybe discouraging me from carrying out the behavior. So those are the main distinctions. I might have the behavioral skill to ride my bike around in my neighborhood, which has very low traffic, and it has some nice little trails, bike riding trails. But I might not feel so confident riding that bike out in traffic, right? My husband rides all over the city. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't feel confident at all in doing that. Okay, so behavioral capability and self-efficacy are, again, task and situation specific. So we talked about the situation of having others who may influence your behavior, who might not find your new health behavior desirable. It might not encourage or support it. Or it might just be the environment, the physical environment, right? So like me not being able to go and ride the bike out in traffic where there's cars and such. Okay. All right. Other cognitive influences on behavior, we have collective efficacy. And this applies to situations where individuals do not have control over the social conditions, institutions that affect their lives. But groups can develop social cohesion and take action for the common good. And so this perceived collective efficacy fosters a group's motivational commitment to engage in the behavior. So someone on their own might not feel confident to carry out a task, but as part of a group, they might feel that they can carry out part of the task and help the whole group succeed, right? So that the collective effort from everyone in the group will lead to some kind of success. And through engagement in groups, that fosters some kind of a group, a collective efficacy. Let me see if I missed anything on this. So several factors regarding the group might be important to this collective efficacy, such as whether there's a good, strong leader that's part of the group, whether the mix of skill and knowledge from each individual in the group helps to provide some kind of synergistic effect for success. Again, also how the group interacts with each other and supports each other. Let's see. So 2 approaches to the measurement of collective efficacy are 1, aggregate member appraisals of their personal capabilities for functions they perform in the group. So I might feel like, oh, I provide this particular benefit to the group in our ability to carry out the behavior, right? So it's my evaluation of my contribution to the group's ability to carry out whatever task is at hand. And the other one is an aggregate members appraisal of the group's capability as a whole. Okay, so those are the 2 distinctions. And you'll find those in the notes section of this slide. Okay, outcome expectations. Okay, so these are basically, what do we expect to happen? if we engage in the behavior? What are our expectations? If I engage in physical activity, what do I expect to happen? There might be a physical outcome expectation. If I exercise, I might get really sore, right? I might just really, I know I'm going to be hurting later in the day, right? And then there's also the social outcome expectations. And it's like, okay, if I exercise, my husband's going to notice and he's going to be really happy that I'm committing to my health, right? And so those are expectations. And whether those outcomes are desirable is another thing, right? We have to evaluate. Yeah, if I exercise, I'm going to hurt. If I exercise, my husband's going to notice, he's going to be happy for me. Are those good things or are those bad things? So one thing is the expectation we have regarding what's going to happen if we engage in the behavior. The other one is the expectancy or the value that we place on that outcome. So if I'm going to be sore later in the day, is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? My evaluation of that might be positive or negative. Most of the time it's negative if I'm sore later in the day. I don't like being in pain. But I do like when my husband realizes I've been exercising and he's like happy and is supportive and gives me positive feedback, right? So that's a good thing. And so those expectancies are really important, okay? So again, the anticipated outcomes of the behavior are the expectations. For example, if I ride a bicycle, I will burn about 1,600 calories. That's the outcome I expect. If I drink 3 glasses of wine, I will feel more sociable or more attractive, right? And now I have to evaluate, I give a value to those outcomes. So burning 1,600 calories, that's a very desirable thing, yeah. So that's going to make me want to engage in that behavior. Being sociable is a desirable thing, right? We get nervous sometimes when we're in social environments. So drinking alcohol might be something that I perceive a certain expectation of making me more sociable. And also a positive expectancy that's a good thing for me, right? Like, yeah, it helps me relax and it helps me have a good time when I'm out with people. Okay, the valuing, the expectancy can also be negative. So it could go either way. Okay, so I just gave you an example of a positive outcome. But basically, these expectancies really motivate us to either engage or not engage in behavior. Okay, let's see. Did I jump ahead? Okay. So there's a whole bunch of potential outcome expectancies for any given behavior, right? So as a function of our learning history, for many behaviors, we might have a ton of expectancies. We might learn that if we engage in a certain behavior, X, Y, Z are going to occur. And some of those might be positive, some of those might be negative. And so depending how many positive or how many negative expectancies, it's going to either motivate you toward or away from engaging in that behavior. So like alcohol use, for example, what are expectations of outcome expectations that you might have, and how many of those fall under the positive, or you can attribute a positive expectancy, and to how many can you attribute a negative expectancy? Let's see, if I drink alcohol, I might feel more sociable, I might feel more relaxed, I might feel prettier, I might feel funnier, I might feel part of the group, right? Like I'm accepted. Negative expectancies. When I drink, sometimes I get really sleepy. When I drink, sometimes on the negative side, if I drink more than 2 or 3 drinks, I get really sleepy and fall asleep for about an hour, but then I wake up and I don't feel good and I can't go back to sleep. So it messes with my sleep cycle, and I really hate that, right? So that's a negative expectancy. So you can see how that works, and how many positive expectancies, or how strong those positive expectancies might be relative to the negative expectancies, and the weight of those will determine whether you're motivated to drink or not to drink. Okay, so we know that knowledge is important to changing all behavior, right? It's an important and necessary component, construct to influence, but it's not sufficient by itself, right? So we will need to educate people as to why certain behaviors are bad or why they're good. They need to understand just this knowledge behind those things and how it can contribute to mortality or survivorship or whatever the case. So definitely a precondition for change, but by itself, just providing knowledge is not usually enough to change behavior. Okay, so approaches to promoting knowledge is to describe the health risk or the benefits of a behavior, and then also kind of doing a step-by-step presentation to building up on the knowledge. Okay. All right, environmental influences are another. So those were the cognitive influences, right? So now let's kind of focus on more on things that are outside of the individual, not inside their noggin, right? Not inside what they're thinking, but rather the environment that they're having to interact with, and that may prevent them or encourage them to participate in behavior. Okay, so we have the social environmental factors. Let's see, they can be perceived, right? Environmental influences, that whether they're there or not, all that matters is that the individual perceives them to be there, or they can be actual, right? Actual physical barriers or facilitators to engaging in a particular behavior. So social environmental factors as part of social learning theory include observational learning, so observing others engaging in the behavior, right? And hopefully they are people like us. Normative beliefs, what do others think we should be doing, right? Whether they be modeling the behavior or not, what is it that these important other people think is beneficial, would be beneficial for us, right? So as a mother, I might think certain things are beneficial for my daughter, and I expect her to do certain things, even if I may not actually engage in those behaviors, right? Social support. So not only am I going to set that expectation for my daughter, right? So normative beliefs are kind of like my perceived expectations of what others want me to do or expect me to do, right? But social support is actually much more than that, because it could provide some kind of instrumental support or social support to engage in the behavior. So it might just be encouragement, like my husband does with me when I exercise, right? It's like he reminds me to exercise, and when I do exercise, he like is proud of me and gives me a pat on the back for exercising. That's different, right? Than just having the expectation for me. It's like that they're actually providing some kind of support and encouragement to engage in the behavior is more than just the normative or the expectation beliefs. Opportunities and barriers. in the environment, right? So and again, these might be perceived opportunities, perceived barriers, and sometimes it's just having to work with somebody to help them identify opportunities that they might not see initially, right? And if there's barriers in the environment, then figuring out solutions for engaging in the behavior around those barriers. Let's see, what else did I miss? Okay. Okay, so another major concept includes the environmental contingencies, such as the potential for rewards and incentives or disincentives and punishments to engage in a behavior. Okay, so observational learning. So we're going to take each of these. So people observe and learn behaviors from others by observing others and the consequences they experience from engaging in the behavior, right? So we used to have a video that was trying to promote condom use among people who had come into a clinic for an STD, to be tested for an STD. And the videos that we would present to them had to have role models that were like themselves. So we were in El Paso, and the role models had to be Hispanic because we know that we want to see role models like ourselves, right? We want to see that it's people like us that are actually engaging in the behavior and capable of carrying out the behavior. Let's see. In the video, they demonstrated the behavior of introducing a condom right with their partner, right as they were going to have sexual relationships, and how they negotiated that. And in the end, when they effectively used the condom, I mean, we didn't show, but it showed that the partner was still very respectful and loving and respectful of their wishes to use the condom, right? So it just kind of role modeled all the ways you could negotiate condom use with your partner, and then also at the end still end up with positive outcomes. Let's see. So again, the observational learning will be influenced by the role model and whether it's someone that we respect or admire or that is like us. And the characteristics of the learner in the situation, in the observational learning situation, has to be attentive to what's going on, has to feel that they can retain the information they took away from the learning incident, right, from the observation. They have to feel that they learned sufficiently to engage in the behavior. And given what happened in the video, they have to be motivated. It should have motivated them to carry out the behavior. Okay, so learning history is also really important because we carry a whole bunch of baggage with us, right, given our many, many experiences that we've had, whether it be through direct experience in terms of trying to carry out the behavior and what kind of contingencies we incurred as a result. Were we positively or negatively reinforced? Also observational learning. What have we learned from observing those around us? Even in the absence of direct reinforcement for oneself, but the role model might be reinforced, right? The one that we're observing, and that might be vicariously reinforcing to us as well. So observational learning, according to Bandura, is one of the most important and efficient ways to promote direct learning or operant learning. Okay, so normative beliefs, again, are what our beliefs and even cultural norms, right? Cultural norms of expectations of how we should be behaving. Um, what's socially acceptable and what's prevalent among people like ourselves. What kind of behaviors are prevalent, right? So most individuals overestimate the prevalence of undesirable behaviors among their peers. So all college students drink, right? What's the problem? Like, we all binge drink. Might be an overstatement, definitely, I think. Um, the perceptions of peer norms are used as a standard to compare one's own behaviors. And so if we hang out with people who do engage in undesirable behaviors, we're more likely to engage in undesirable behaviors ourselves, right? So the norms within our groups. Um, so the motivation to comply with social norms is influenced by expected social consequences and self-evaluation of consequences of engaging in those behaviors. Okay, so normative beliefs, it's very similar to theory of planned behavior and what we refer to as subjective norms, okay, or social norms. All right, let's go on. Another environmental influence is social support from those around us, any kind of perception of encouragement or support a person receives from their social network. And again, there's different types, right? Social support is like the generic term we use to describe all sorts of supports, but the support might be emotional, right? If you're feeling down or sad or angry, just someone that's providing understanding and saying it's going to be okay, that sort of support is really good. Esteem is also any kind of support that helps build up your self-esteem. So when my husband, tells me that I'm exercising, I'm looking good, or he even seem more energetic, he tries to build me up. And he knows it works on me. Informational support, so perhaps someone gets diagnosed with something, and they're trying to figure out what are the best actions to take, and someone might help them find information on the topic at hand, or information on where to buy equipment to carry out certain behaviors, or information on where to get training, or what is the most affordable gym out there. There's all sorts of informational support, right, that we can get. Instrumental support is also really important, and that just means, helping us carry out tasks that we would not normally, I guess, the tasks that might free up our time to engage in the behavior we need to do. So my husband's over there making breakfast while I'm exercising in the morning, and that's very instrumental. That's very helpful for me, right? It frees up some of my time so I can exercise. Okay, so basically these are just anything that aids in adherence to new behaviors and contributes to the person's perceived self-efficacy. Okay, so again, barriers and opportunities, right? And these can be perceived, right? So these are attributes of the environment that make the behaviors harder or easier to perform. They can be cognitive in nature, or they can be environmental and physical. Cognitive, for example, might not have self-efficacy to overcome barriers. I don't have the confidence to exercise in light of all these physical barriers. I don't have a safe community to go out and exercise in. So I just don't feel confident in getting out there and exercising. Then there's the physical aspect, right? The actual physical barriers or facilitators of the behavior. So any infrastructure to perform a physical activity. So I have behind my house a really nice alleyway that has a really nice little walking trail, and it's safe and away from all traffic. I could ride my bike through there. I could walk my dogs through there. And guess what? It leads straight to the park. So it's really, really nice, right? And it's like, it's a facilitator. It's an opportunity for me to get up and become active fairly easily. Right? Okay, so let's see. What else do we have? Supporting behavioral factors such as behavioral skills, intentions, goal setting. We talked in the extra article we read this week. There were those, they talked a lot about goal setting and planning and how important that was to being able to carry it out a behavior successfully, right? And then there's reinforcement and punishment. So all of these are classified as either health enhancing or health compromising. Okay, so let's see what these are. Okay, so behavioral skills. So we acquire behavioral skill and engage in self-regulation through self-monitoring, goal setting, getting feedback on how we're doing, right? It's like we like to know that how much we walked in a day, or we like to know that we're feeling better, or we like to know that that we're losing weight, right? Or any kind of feedback that you might be getting through your documentation. Self-reward is really important, right? So you can buy yourself cool workout clothes if you're trying to exercise. That might be a reward for yourself. And then self-critique, meaning just go in and evaluate how you're doing and figure out where you need to adjust. Okay. Other supporting behavioral factors are intentions. Again, this is just an indicator of readiness to perform a behavior. It's an indicator of one's motivation to engage in that behavior. So specifying intentions within a relatively short period of time are very powerful predictors of future behavior. So again, remember, as like typically we want those intentions set within a month, a period of a month or less, right? In the next month, I intend to exercise 5 days a week, right? So that's where I am right now. That's why I'm talking about so much exercise. I'm just starting to get into an exercise regime. Okay, so there's a lot of need for planning, right? When we're engaging in a behavior, kind of setting your environment and figuring out how you're going to do it, where, when, and then setting goals for yourself so that you'll stay motivated, right? It's like you don't just want to plan where, when, and what, but you want to set goals for yourself. Like, I want to lose 5 pounds, or I want to be able to build up to running 5 miles, right? Or whatever the case. But you want to start setting goals that you can work toward. So I told you this was a very busy theory. So let's talk about reinforcement and punishment. So behavior can be modified through the provision or the removal of rewards or punishments, right? These can be tangible, or they could just be social. So a reinforcer is a stimulus that strengthens the behavior, therefore reinforces the behavior, right? A punishment is a stimulus that weakens the behavior. So let's talk about those a little bit more. Okay, and how they operate. So reinforcement can be positive or negative, right? So going back, reinforcement, a stimulus that strengthens the behavior. So it's going to be a positive or negative reinforcer, something positive or negative that strengthens the behavior. Okay, so When you have positive reinforcement, a reward is provided if the desired behavior is performed. So if you eat your vegetables, you can play your video game, right? You might tell your child. There can also be negative reinforcement. So you remove a punishment if the desired behavior is performed. For example, when you put your seatbelt on, right? The annoying buzzing noise that the car makes because you haven't put your seatbelt goes away, right? So you engage in the behavior and the negative annoying noise goes away. Okay. All right. In contrast, punishment is designed to reduce the behavior, right? So you can have positive punishment. So a punishment is issued if the undesired behavior is performed, right? So if they misbehave, they're going to go to timeout, or you might give your child a small spank or a scolding, right, for engaging in the undesirable behavior. Negative punishment means that you would remove a reward if the undesired behavior is performed. So, for example, if the child misbehaves, they're not going to get any dessert, or they don't get to play their video games, or they don't get to watch TV, right? So you're taking something away. In order to reduce the behavior. Okay. One big final concept for social cognitive theory is reciprocal determinism. And this just means that there is always interaction going on among the person, their behavior, and their environment. There's constant influence on each other, kind of a pull and pull, right, on between the three. And people are affected by their environment, and people can also affect their environment. And so an example of this might be through an interaction between the person and the environment. So I always use the example of the Coke machine. So my office is all the way at the end of a hallway, and at the end of the hallway, it's a Coke machine. And so that Coke machine is very bad for me because I do like to drink soda every now and then. And so as long as it's there, I'm tempted. And if they put it there, then I typically go and buy a soda at least once a day. Okay. So that's how my environment is influencing my behavior. But on the other hand, I could work with the people in my department to say, don't purchase anything from that machine. It doesn't belong here. It's unhealthy. We are a public health department, and we don't want those kind of unhealthy vending machines in our building. So I convince everybody to stop buying Cokes from those vending machines, right? And because they're not selling, they eventually remove the machine from our building or from our floor, right? And so in that case, I influence the environment, right? So the environment can influence me, but I can also influence my environment, okay? And so, oops. So here is just, there we go, just a depiction, a little graphic of how the person influences their behavior and how behavior might influence the environment. And then again, we can go, each one can have reciprocal determination on the other. And that's why the arrows are two-sided, right? There you see the little point arrow on each side. So the person's expectations, expectancies, self-efficacy, self-control, right, are all important factors that influence how they behave. And sometimes their environment might influence them as well. Okay, so basically reciprocal determinism refers to behavior changes that result from an interaction between the person and the environment. Again, if we limit choices in the environment, then it limits our behavioral reactions. Vending machines don't offer junk food, we eat less junk food, right? If we modify our behavioral reactions, then the environment will change in response. So if we don't purchase junk food or sodas from vending machines, the vendors are less likely to stock up with those products in their machines, or might remove their machines altogether. Huh. Okay. So so the advantages of the social cognitive theory is that it provides a ton of tools. Um, Sometimes people make the mistake of claiming that they are engaging in this or applying the social cognitive theory, but they are only really focusing on self-efficacy. So they're really only focusing on that one construct, the one construct that applies to many, many different types of theories, right? So that's kind of like, wait, are you really focusing on social cognitive theory? But it does provide, this theory does provide lots of tools to facilitating behavior change. Again, we learned about the four different types of four ways to influence self-efficacy. Uh, Self-regulation skills are really important, and we saw that in the article we read this week, right? That was one of the big predictors of whether people sustain behavior change over the long run. The importance of modifying one's environment, right? We can influence our environment to facilitate the behaviors. The importance of incentivizing behaviors. So we talked about punishment and reinforcement, both positive and negative on each category. And then modifying outcome expectancies. How do we change the way people think about potential outcomes of a specific behavior, right? How do we get them to redirect their attention from negative expectancies to actually thinking up of new positive expectancies that they can associate with the behavior that will motivate them to engage in the behavior? Okay, so let's see. How long have we been talking? Okay. Okay, so I don't think this says anything new. Um, so building self-regulation, again, a really important emphasis of social cognitive theory. Again, we have to learn to self-monitor, right, to increase our awareness of when we're engaging in undesirable behaviors or when we might engage in positive behaviors. Look for those cues to action, right? So identify times that will cue you to want to engage in the behavior, or something that'll cue you to be on your guard to not engage in the behavior, right? That's one of the cues that they use with folks who engage in binge drinking. When, I mean, typically this was in times when you were given a bottle and you collected the cap to the bottle to keep track of how many drinks you were having, or whenever you would take the little latch off a beer, a aluminum can. But typically now you just push it in, right? And they bring you a bottle of beer or whatever without a cap on. So you have to figure out new contexts or new cues for yourself to help you monitor how much you're drinking. You need to set goals. That's really important. And initially, it's really important to set short-term goals because it's rewarding when you meet a goal, right? But you can't make them so easy or so short that they are accomplished and then you're done, right? So you need both short and long-range goals. You need to have some accurate, objective feedback on your progress, right? Not just what you think you're doing, but some kind of objective kind of feedback, whether it be a pedometer that's counting how much you're walking, or weighing yourself and making sure that the scale is correct and weighing you accurately. You could set up a self-reward system or work with someone in your environment to reward you for engaging in and meeting your goals. Um, and again, that includes the social support. Okay. So these are just a variety of ways and tips that people use to modify the environment. For example, change the contents of your cupboard, right? It's like if you're going on a diet, you stop buying the junk food and you throw out or you give away all the junk food to other people, just so you won't be tempted with it throughout the day, especially now that we're home most of the day. It used to be when I was home, I would eat terribly unhealthy. Now that I'm home all day, I have to be really careful with that and stay away from the kitchen during my work days so that I'm not eating all day, engaging in unhealthy snacking. You want to eliminate triggers for the negative behaviors. So remove Doritos from the pantry. Get rid of any negative social influences. Stop hanging out with people who smoke, right? If you're trying to quit smoking. Uh, and then you want to modify the environmental contingencies. So set up that reward system for meeting goals and or successive approximations. How do we change expectations, right? How do we get people to think differently as to what to expect when they engage in what outcomes to expect when they engage in a behavior? And so we can do this through health education so that we can identify negative outcomes, long and short term, of a certain behavior, if it's an unhealthy behavior. You can change the decisional balance, right, through motivational interviewing techniques. You can ask questions like, tell me about how important getting good grades and a good job are for you. And now tell me, how does alcohol interfere with your ability to achieve those goals of getting good grades and maintaining a good job, right? But expectancies, once we have those values on certain behavioral outcomes, sometimes they're really, really hard to change. Okay, so, but we need to kind of help people focus and identify positive expectancies as opposed to negative expectancies. Okay, so future directions. Social cognitive theory really emphasizes the importance of taking the environment into account, any kind of environmental influences on the behavior. And without doing this, I think that's why a lot of those individual behavior change interventions are not effective. So maybe that's why social cognitive theory uses a lot of those cognitive factors that we identified in earlier theories, but it also combines them with all these other environmental influences as well. Okay, that way it really helps to promote behavioral self-efficacy, right, and positive outcomes. One of the last points here is when engaging in theory-based research, we really need to be using good, reliable, and valid instruments. And that's something we're going to learn about next semester in research methods. But for now, I know that like today's article had a lot of statistics, a lot of indicators about how reliable the measures they were using were, and I know that's kind of might be information that's not familiar yet, and it's okay. It's okay, don't worry about it. We'll cover it next semester. Okay. All right, so that's it for the social cognitive theory. In a bit, I will record the lecture for the article we covered today. I did not record a lecture. I'm not recording a lecture for Chapter 8. because it's just an overview. And so, but you are responsible for any information in there. It's short and sweet, and it's just introducing you to what we're going to be covering in the next few weeks. Okay, and part of that should have been, Chapter 8 should have given you a very brief introduction to social cognitive theory. All right, so remember to work on those assignments. Remember to be a good contributor. Remember to contribute to your group's self-efficacy, for developing an effective PSA, right, to promote whatever behavior it is that you're going to focus on. If for some reason you missed out on contributing, you need to contact me and figure out a plan B as to what you're going to do for this assignment. You do not want to get a 0 on this assignment, okay? All right. I'll see you in a bit.